Welcome to Getting Rich Together. I'm your host, Shama Bunton. This show was born from my own journey. Coming out of a divorce, I reached out to 50 women to talk to them about money. 95% of them did not want to go there. That's when I realized we need spaces where wealth isn't hidden in silence, but shared in possibilities. Here, you'll meet women from all backgrounds, trailblazers, risk takers, visionaries, each expanding what wealth can look like. This is your place to be inspired, to discover new pathways, and to remember that we rise by building wealth together. Getting Rich Together is a Wealth Catalyst production. At Wealth Catalyst, we bring together education, networks, and great opportunities for women to build wealth and change the world. Now, on to today's show. I am blessed today with the incredible presence of Biet Simkin, a renowned spiritual teacher, best-selling author, and the David Bowie of meditation. From her early days in New York City's rock and roll scene and through deep personal loss and trauma, my darling Biet, you have forged such a unique path in this world, dotted with healing, creativity, and greatness. I'm so excited to have you here today on the show to not just talk about how you blend music and breath work and ancient practices to help everyone awaken on this planet, but for us to get to know you a little bit deeper, the little girl behind the magic, the unfolding of the future. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Shama. Thanks for having me.
Oh, how incredible. I was so in awe of the first time we got a chance to connect together. There's something deeply intuitive and grounding about being in your presence. And I feel such a gift to get a chance to interview you today and take us back to some places that I think are so important in this world, which are our beginnings, our roots, where it all came from. So Biet, let's go back. Let's go back to a young girl, someone between the ages of 8 and 12 years old. Where were you on this planet? What was life like around you? And what were some of the money stories you were picking up?
You know, I am blessed to have had such a terrifyingly sad beginning. Blessed to have had that. And between the ages of 8 and 12 were really like the prime years of evidence that hell can be experienced on earth. My mom had just died of pancreatic cancer very suddenly. We were immigrants in America living in Queens. My father was not a normal person, so it wasn't like she left, a parent died, and I was left with a parent. She died. She was more parental than him, although neither of them were extremely parental. And when she died, he was an awakened shaman. So that's who raised me. And so I was being raised by an awakened shaman in abject poverty, roaches and mice throughout our tenement apartment in Queens. Just, you know, the worst views you could possibly imagine. I remember I used to look out the window and just think, I cannot believe that there's a part of the world anywhere where this is the view that someone gets when they look out the window. I was already reading, like at the age of 9, I was reading Carl Gustav Jung, Sigmund Freud. I was reading Erich Fromm at the age of 9. And so really well-educated writing music I was already doing and meditating deeply, studying breath work, transcendental meditation, somatic practices with my father, doing fourth way work. My father was a fourth way master. And my father was really into poverty. He was from that school of awakening where he just really focused on how much love mattered. And so he taught me what love was, and he taught me the value of love and truth and dignity and grace and magic and the value of transcendental states and the value of wit, humor, intelligence. Those things were mastered and they were considered the money in the world. That's real money. And anything else was poo-pooed upon. Now, I don't think my dad was aware of this. It was a blind spot for him. I think if you had asked him, he would have said, I love money. In fact, I can already hear his voice. Oh, I love money. But what I was being taught was money is to be ashamed of. Money causes problems. People who have more money, you know, he had clients who had more money and they all had all kinds of problems. And so he just would attribute those problems to their money. Somehow he made that correlation. And I bought into that, you know, at that age. I was convinced that money was bad, it was dangerous, and I was lucky somehow to be living in these very, very unsafe circumstances without any security whatsoever. No health insurance, no life insurance, public school, crying every day, poverty.
I was going to ask, how did things show up for you at school? I mean, obviously, what you're reading, what you're being exposed to, your consciousness and awareness at such a young age, but yet still having to sort of go through these very human things of being a child and having to go through the human experience of, oh, these are the other students, or reconciling things when you have so much awareness of everything. How were those, let's call them high school, junior high years for you? Was there a need or a desire to pick up a part-time job? How did you start to absorb what you were seeing around you and your awareness, understanding of your situation?
I knew I didn't fit in. And so I felt very lonely in that. And I was often picked on. I'd been punched or beat down. People targeted me for being different. I got made fun of a lot. People with very heavy street type accents would be like, why are you trying to be so intelligent? And then punch me in the face, that kind of thing. And so by the time I was 14, I really came into my own. I didn't have this, you strike me in the short time that we've known each other as someone who has much more level-headed concepts and much more grounded ideas about reality, would even think to do a part-time job. That's not the way my brain worked. From the way that I was raised, the idea of a part-time job or any job seemed crazy to me because I knew I was magic. I was like, what I have, this gift that I have with singing and this gift that I have with these transcendental states are so incredibly valuable that anything that's paying me $10, $12, $14 an hour is like a waste of my time. I should just be sitting on my floor, meditating and writing music because that's the thing that's going to get me out of this. And so I focused on that. And my father did reverberate that to me. He said, look, you could go get a job. He's like, but at the end of the day, no job is going to pay you the kind of money that you're worth. You are extremely valuable on this planet. And you need to harness those skills. So if you need to do yoga or you need to meditate, do whatever you need to do, harness those skills. He gave me this unreasonable self-awareness of my value, but then just no ground, nuts and bolts, wake up and go do something. He was very anti that.
So we're in high school. There's this deep awareness of power, of magic, which is it's so incredible because I feel like the awareness of magic for most, I would say, comes so much later in life, right? It's after exhausting the frameworks that don't work. And eventually there's oh, let me tap into this thing that I feel and can experience. And so at this young age, you're sitting with all this wisdom. So how did you then, graduation time comes from high school, you're deeply convicted with who you are in this world, with your gifts in this world. What comes next in your young adult life? How do you start to navigate life?
In high school, I started playing gigs. I formed a band and started playing gigs in New York City. And as a New Yorker, I don't know if you've interviewed some New Yorkers, but New York, it'll grow you fast. I knew things. I didn't know this until I was an adult. It didn't come to me as a hit of oh, I get it. I learned how to live life on the streets of New York, which is there is no college that could possibly teach you those kinds of skills. And I just had street smarts, the kind that you get when you're running from someone with a chainsaw at 2 a.m. through the Lower East Side. You just don't learn that kind of stuff. So anyway, I got signed to Sony when I was 18 years old because I was scrappy and we had an amazing band. I remember my high school was filled with people who, again, I was always kind of an outsider, but I remember they were making fun of me and they were like, oh, Biet's playing a show at CBGB's. Let's all go and just see her because she's going to suck. And we can kind of laugh or some. I think that was their goal. And then they came to CBGB's and were just so flabbergasted by how talented I was. And we're like, okay, oops, not quite, And it was just cool. I got signed to Sony and then it just kind of all went downhill from there before it went back up. But that was the beginning was I got signed to Sony. It was limousines and, recording studios with guns on the table and cigars and you
Holy
know.
bananas. Oh my God. As you're getting this early validation, right? So like everyone's dream, who's a musician is to get signed. And obviously you're quite young when this is all going down. Aside from just like the sheer, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. The contracts and sort of understanding implications of things. Like was there anyone in your life who was explaining anything to you about what you were signing and how this all unfolded? Navigate that specific period. And what was it that you began to sort of learn quickly or in hindsight about it?
For me, I just had a ginormous ego, as many people who have the level of access to magic. You said people come to this later. When someone comes to it as early as I did, it comes like the side effect of it is just an oversized ego. That's the dark side, the shadow, I might say, of having that level of access to that level of confidence. The shadow is that you're wildly insecure secretly. You're like, whoa. So I feel like I was like, I've arrived. It's all done. I had this Marilyn Monroe kind of like, ha 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 behavior. No, I did not have anyone walking me through anything. I got lucky in a way because it all just went to shit. So it wasn't like I lost anything. I didn't lose rights in the way that Leonard Cohen was taken for a ride by his manager and lost all his money, had to go on tour at the age of 70 or something. I did not have that. I just had a career that kind of quickly collapsed as the record industry collapsed. I got signed probably like the year that there was like the huge Napster lawsuit thing with Metallica and all that.
This thing's happening. Oh my God, this is amazing. I'm the best thing since sliced bread, or I'm better than sliced bread. And then, oh shit, everything falls apart. Music industry is in disarray. I think everyone listening is old enough to remember what has happened in the music industry and all these big sort of inflection points. How did you respond to that? And at that time when you had signed the contract, did you have advances? Were you starting to receive money in a new way that you hadn't before? And how did you sort of think about the money you were receiving at that time?
I sure did get advances, plus like a limousine rides anywhere I wanted and my vocal lessons paid for and a stipend. Like it was just so much money that time in the record industry that they just would throw around at absolutely nothing. They were like, this person's just doing a demo. Great, here's 20 grand. No big deal. And I was coming from complete poverty, learning lessons from this man who was like, all you need to do is meditate and the quantum field will like that. And so I was just like, it's all going to work out. Anyway, it collapsed. I turned to drugs and alcohol. That was my way. And sex. I want to be very clear. I've never been, what is that word? When you're promiscuous. I'm not promiscuous. I was just like someone who serially fell in love with the wrong person. I would be like, you seem totally wrong. Let's date so that we could like break each other's hearts. And so that drinking, lots of drinking. I didn't turn to drugs until a couple of years in, but yeah, drinking and dating the wrong men. That was my way of dealing with reality.
Wow. So this contract is over. You're trying to get back on your feet. Sounds like you're figuring things out. How did you absorb or think about living, right? Had you saved any money from the money you had before? Was it like the universe, God's going to take care of me? And how did you navigate this like high, low, and then this crash and trying to be human and also navigate what the hell's going on in my life?
No, I didn't save. I didn't even understand that concept. I had a box with $1,000 in it in physical cash. And then I remember my house actually got burglarized and they didn't find my cash because it was like hidden in a Monopoly board game that I had hidden it in. And I was like, yeah, that's right, bitches. Like you didn't find my cash. Anyway, I decided to shave my head and travel across the country selling CDs to make money. And so I went by myself by Amtrak. I didn't know how to drive because I'm like a tried and true New Yorker. And so I went across on Amtrak and sold CDs and had a guitar and played shows all over the country and fell in love by the time I got to San Francisco. And just my life was very like charmed in one aspect. Like I would go and fall in love with someone who happened to have a 5-story house in like the nicest part of San Francisco. Just like, whatever, you're just going to live there. But at the same time, I had no money. And I remember having so much shame because people would pay for me for everything. Now I'm a girl and we live in America where that is like standard in some way, but I still had so much shame for being someone who did not know how to earn. And I couldn't even admit that. I just drank over it. And eventually I discovered drugs. I came back to New York City and became a DJ, which DJing gigs, I mean, if you can call that a job, some people would often make fun of it and say, DJing's not really a job. You just play music you like in a box. But yeah, I did that. And I would get like 50 to $100 an hour and just do drugs and hang out and party for free. And that was my career for a period of time. I didn't really see it as a job. I saw it as they're paying me money to do the thing I was going to do anyway.
I feel like there's so much in there about allowing for things to come up and like being in a state of like, where am I? This feels good. Let's try this. Like this kind of like fluidity of almost like this confidence that everything is going to work out, but without knowing everything's going to work out and just sort of being in the moment. It's like things are all happening and I'm not quite sure what's going on. You have a lot of fun being a DJ. You are producing music, having a good time during these years. Are you still heavily in your practice? Are you like embodying the lessons that your father had taught you as you're sort of, navigating this world of music and now being a DJ? How close together were those things or how disparate were they?
Very much I was. And I was that weird bird. I would go to these after parties on massive amounts of cocaine right before I did massive amounts of heroin. And I would be that girl sitting in the corner of the party at 11 a.m. with like an A-list celebrity to my left and a, model to my right. And that whole just New York City, world, and being like, basically like Yoda, like sharing like these deep, deep mystical truths and having like a crew of people sitting around me and snorting cocaine with me and being like, she knows something, And then there was always the people too who really weren't into what I was all about. They were really just super into the shallow simplicity of New York City party life. And even if they did get close, sometimes they would just be like, she's really like extra, like she's really extra. So there was people who got it or really were into it. And then there was people who were like, that's a lot, like super not my vibe,
How long did that period of life last for you?
It lasted a couple years, and then universe or source or quantum field, whatever, your audience will most relate to, right? We're all talking about the same thing. Some people call it Jesus. Honestly, it's just one energy that ties us all together. I think love is a good word to describe it. But that loving energy came in and really was beset to let me know that I was going in the wrong direction, as it will, right? Our lives are very much being directed by a navigational system that we cannot see. And that navigational system came in quite hard at 24. I had a near-death experience. And then at 26, I got pregnant and had a baby. And I had to sober up for that experience. But sober, I was very dry. Dry meaning like I didn't have a spiritual solution to my alcoholism at that time. I just was like, I guess I'll stop drinking because I'm pregnant kind of vibes. Mm-hmm. And then I had her, perfectly healthy baby girl. Her name was Ula. And then 4 months later, she died of sudden infant death syndrome and was brought dead into my arms by the father. And after that, my best friend hung himself, and then my father died of a heart attack and my house burnt down. I lived in the half of the house that hadn't burnt down, doing drugs. Like I was so destroyed after my baby's death and all these deaths. Then my best friend hung himself, then my dad died. And it was those 4 special events that really led to me having the awakening, that led to me becoming sober. I've been sober now for coming up on 17 years.
So as the world around you is crumbling and things can't seem to get worse, but then they do, and you find yourself in this place of having nothing in front of you, yet everything in front of you. How did you sort of start to take the next steps? What did the future you that you've now come into, how did she start to form?
She got sober. And then that sobriety was the seed that led to, as soon as I got sober, something weird happened. I had this thing that they call a pink cloud, which is this phase of life that follows getting sober, where you know exactly that you have been saved from something for a reason. And like everything becomes so clear. And for a year of time, I just saw very clearly that I had been saved from death or from just like a lifetime of nothingness so that I could become great and I could actually go make a difference in the world. And that feeling was so deeply. And then for the first 4 years of sobriety, I spent those years in poverty. Like I had no money because I didn't know how to make money. I knew how to make music. I was still recording music. I had the prince will come mentality, like someday my prince will come. It wasn't a man necessarily that was going to come and save me, but I just thought like a record company or a movie company or a celebrity or someone with a lot of power and push or pull was going to come and see how talented I was and was going to say, okay, we're going to do something with this. It never occurred to me at that time anyway, that I was going to be the one that was going to have to do something with it. I was like, I just didn't see myself as someone who was capable of doing things. I was someone who was so focused on making art and being a philosopher that it didn't occur to me that I was going to also have to learn to be a businesswoman. In fact, I mean, that idea just didn't even occur. And then 4 years into sobriety, I had a new awakening where my now husband, then boyfriend, turned to me and he said, look, he had done a bunch of work with his money stuff and had gone from earning like 60 grand a year to 200 grand a year, which for him was a lot of money at the time. And he was very proud. And I didn't know anything about money. I didn't know about how much I was making because I was living in such deep vagueness and such commitment to my vagueness. Shame and vagueness were like my religion when it came to money. Like I was like, I'm just going to bow at the altar of shame and being vague. That's where I'm going to live. And he turned to me one day and he said, well, let's just look at your numbers. Maybe you will too. And so I ran out of the room crying as soon as he presented that to me. I thought if he knew how broke I really was, he would leave me. I just couldn't even fathom that he would tolerate the level of unmanageability that I had around money. And so I ran out of the room crying. And then, of course, I turned to a transformative experience around money. I learned spreadsheets. I read every book that I could about money. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and all the money books, Busting Loose from the Money Game, Secrets of a Millionaire Mindset, Earn What You Deserve, How to Get Out of Debt and Live Prosperous. And I started meticulously tracking my numbers, which for me was like so opposite action. And I saw within 90 days that I was earning $1,000 a month, living in New York City. $1,000 a month. I was doing random odd jobs for $20 an hour at the time. I was making $12,000 a year. I mean, that's like way below the poverty line. And my husband was paying a little bit more rent, but my rent was $400 a month at the time. And we were living in like Long Island City or something. Anyway, we moved to Williamsburg. Our rent went up and I had this big surrender. And I remember I manifested this business coach who like was working with me for free. And he was like, well, why don't you just do this thing? You're so good with meditation. Like, trust yourself, just go do it. And so I did. I launched this business where I had this vision that I was meant to fuse art galleries in New York with all the work that I've done with meditation. So I created a meditation sequence and I started bringing it to art galleries. And it took off. It went so well that within months, I went from having like 4 people in a circle to like 100 people in a circle. And I was written up in Forbes and Elle and Vogue and flown to Hawaii and like flown all over the globe to speak. And this is before I even had a book deal. And I went, and I remember right before this happened, my husband turned to me at the beginning when I was earning that $1,000 a month and barely knowing what to do. He said, why don't you just go get a job at Starbucks or something, babe? Like, you can do anything. And I was like, no, babe, you don't know me. You don't know me. Like, I'm never going to work a job at Starbucks. Not to hate on anyone who works at Starbucks. So excited for anyone who's that high functioning. I'm not. I'm like a weird bird. And so, but I went from earning $1,000 a month. And then I went from that to earning $170,000 a year within a year. And then I had my first baby since, sobriety. Her name is Cash. I named her Cash because I thought might as well like bring in some more money. And so then that's not why I named her Cash. I just like that idea. Anyway, she was born. And as soon as she was born, I was making $170K a year. And I was like, this is not gonna motherfucking cut it. And I instantly, within the time that she was born, I stopped breastfeeding. I went back to work 2 months later and I tripled my income. And then for a while was earning whatever that was, like $400K a year. And then I was like, this isn't enough. And then during COVID had another spiritual awakening. And that led to me earning $1 million a year. And let me just be super clear. In this time, I did it completely my way. And I never learned business. I never learned strategies. I never did online marketing. I never had all the things that my businessy friends suggested. Maybe you should do Marie Forleo's da-da-da, and maybe you should start an online funnel, or maybe you should do this. All the things that people I saw who had level-headed brains do around and work their buns off to earn whatever, I was like a no to. I would literally start crying whenever my businessy friends would suggest these things. I'd be like, I don't think that's for me. I just don't think so. Like, I really think my destiny is to be the new Ram Dass. I'm just going to hold out for that because I know who I am. Yeah. So that went on for 4 years. I was earning that for 4 years. And that kind of brings us to today.
So this magical business coach gives you the nudge and is like, hey, this can happen. And then there's something that happens between the great idea and then the thought turning into the thing. And those are sort of the inspired actions you took, right? Putting yourself out there in a way you had to create a price for these things. And you had to sort of start to think about, what does this look like? Did you ever think about, was it like, how are they going to value this? Like, this is what I think the price should be, as someone who's likely not doing a competitive matrix on other companies that are like doing these different things. How did you start to navigate putting a price tag on something that you had sort of had your whole life, right? And now you were going to really stand for this and turn this into something that would then end up making you lots of capital, right? But how did you start to think about pricing and putting yourself out there?
I looked to the greats. Like, I looked to statements made by Picasso. I remember there was a story that he was at a dinner party with a woman. She turned to him and said, hey, would you draw me a little drawing on this napkin? Do you know this story? And he goes, oh, sure. And so he draws her a drawing on the napkin. She says, oh, thank you. And then begins to put it into her purse. And he says, oh, you can't take that with you unless you want to give me 60 grand. And she's like, 60 grand? It's a napkin. And he's like, I'm Picasso. I just drew on that napkin. If it was just a napkin, I'm sure it could be priced at whatever you think a napkin should be priced at, but I just scribbled on it. Therefore, it's worth 60K because I said so. And he kind of, she felt embarrassed and he took it back, and that was the end of the exchange. But I felt very much like I am that to the planet. And so I can say whatever I want to say. And I would get into these phone calls with prospective clients and explain to them who I was. And back then too, I didn't know the marketing strategy of like, make it about them and make them feel like they're going to get something. All I knew was, I have a gift. You'd be lucky to be in my presence, because anyone who's been in my presence as a friend or an acquaintance before I used to charge for this stuff, their lives transform. And so I'm like, look, you want to actually have access to this? Whatever the fuck this portal is, like, I am the bridge between this world and the world that you cannot see. So if you want to spend time in that world, I got the answer. And I think people were also inspired by my story, that I had come from such adversity and was living this very prestigious, fancy, it looks very good on Instagram type of life. Like, I think nobody would look at me looking at my Instagram and think, wow, that's a person who probably was on food stamps and Medicaid 11 years ago.
Pause for a second. If you're not already on the Wealth Catalyst Substack, you are missing out. Over 20,000 people have subscribed, and they are diving into stories, strategies, and money expanders you won't find anywhere else. Join us today and keep fueling your wealth journey. Check out the link in the show notes. Now back to the show.
No, nobody would get that impression. Okay, so claiming your price and really doubling is such a beautiful story of like really doubling down on yourself, or tripling down, quadrupling down on you and this inherent knowingness. And it almost feels like the thing that so many people have a deeper knowingness, but are too scared to like lean into it even a little bit. And you're like, I'm leaning into my knowingness like 120%, like more than all the way. And it sounds like the universe is responding in kind, right? So things were sort of shifting. How did things start to change around you? So obviously, going from $12,000 a year to $170,000 a year is substantial material change, right? For you, for your family. Now your household income has almost doubled, and then it continues to increase. How did you even think about, as your capital and your money was growing, like, were there any old stories that would pop up of what to do with the money? Or were you sort of intuitively guided by how to treat your assets? Like, money was coming in, but where did it go?
Well, the fun thing here is that I really made a lot of mistakes, and I don't see them as mistakes because I don't believe God makes mistakes, what I call God. I'm grateful that I did all the things I did, but because I had this deep faith and I've always known that I'm here to do big, big stuff. To me, $1 million a year was like, this is obviously not what God put me on this planet to make. And so it's going to transform from 1 million to 8 to 20 very quickly. And so all I need to do is go buy beautiful clothes, enjoy 5-star hotels, travel the world, eat delicious food, move to a beautiful house. I was so irresponsible with that money by anybody's standards who actually understands how money works. Like, you have to invest. I did invest it in a way toward growing the way that my business looked. Like, I feel like I did understand that from a marketing standpoint. I was like, I'm sure my fans are going to enjoy me going to this 5-star hotel because that shows them that I'm worthy of whatever my rates are. So I understood the marketing ideas, but I didn't understand, like, you should take 20% of this and put it away here. And you should put 10% and this and tithe. And you should find someone who's going to be like a money. I had fears around people who were going to try to put me in a box, because I was like, clearly my crazy thinking is what leads to buco dollars. So I'm going to lean more into crazy thinking. And so what I did was I went a little too far into crazy thinking and a little out of like grounded decision making. Luckily for me, I'm married to a man who's very, very grounded. And so he was just like, Biet, this is crazy. Like, you should be more grounded with this money and we should make that. And so he did push me in ways to save, and we were able to save quite a bit of money. But other than that, I hadn't evolved past that point. And so that was like the big turning point, was a year ago when I had this big awakening, like, oh, I'm going to need to learn some things about business, and I'm going to need to actually study how growing money works. And, there's this feeling, I believe, when we're willing to do something, the universe only makes us do like 20% of it, right? So we have this feeling like, oh my God, it's going to be so overwhelming. What am I going to do? Get an MBA? I'm 46 years old. That's crazy. And it's not as bad as we think it's going to be. Universe is asking us to shift. It's really just asking us to shift the way we see reality. It's asking us to say, are you willing to be wrong? Are you willing to learn new skills? Like me learning how to do spreadsheets 11 years ago, look what it led to, $1 million a year, me laying poolside and guiding people through the quantum field. Like, who the fuck would have guessed that, right? Some spreadsheets could have, but these grounded tools such as spreadsheets can actually be instruments of God. And today, actually, what I teach in my work is that sales and marketing strategy and messaging, these types of things are a tenet of spiritual awakening. And if you do not know how to sell on this planet, you will not get your inner perfect vision, your inner perfect gift that Source planted inside you to enough people and to make the impact that you actually came here to make. Someone like Edison, someone like Benjamin Franklin, these people who made these huge shifts in our society, like the reason we have electricity, they knew how to sell. They believed in themselves. They were sold on themselves. And I feel like that's something that I'm bringing into my spiritual teachings. And actually, one last thing I'll say is, up until recently, I was very afraid to admit that I taught people about money, because I felt like, oh, that's for like charlatans on the internet who are like, join my money mastermind and you'll learn how to feel your nervous system till you blah, blah. And I'm just like, oh my God, I don't want to be one of those people. But at the end of the day, people would often come to me and say, how do you make the kind of money you make doing what you do, which is so radically outside the box? And so I was like, wait, people are looking to learn this. So why don't I admit that I'm teaching this publicly?
That is so incredible. What landed with me is just the importance of being able to not only understand one's own gift and like purpose on this planet, but the idea that sales is almost our birthright of claiming and owning, standing into this thing that we know we're here to do. And if we can't communicate that to others in a way that they can hear it, then our gifts really get lost. I have this firm conviction that we are all creators And if we're not creating, and even people who work in corporate jobs, if they stop creating at work and no one sees it, right, and they're not able to speak about it, then they quit their job and they're looking for other people to sort of create the right conditions for them to be able to be creative or to be able to be heard and be able to be seen in what they accomplish and do. And it makes me think of not just how important sales is for the entrepreneur, but also sales for everybody, and
Yes.
for being able to be able to claim and own and not everyone's meant to hear everything, but my gosh, like there's a way to get our perspectives across. And so understanding people, I think, is also important. Okay, so today you are here claiming this incredible future that is rapidly unfolding for you. And like things are percolating. And there's something that's clear in my mind, which is when you decide, you receive. And so there's like, all right, this isn't cutting it. It's time for something else. And the next thing unfolds. I'm curious, in planting the seeds and starting to take your next shifts, what do these coming months and years start to map out for you? What are the details? What's the scaffolding? Does it all feel rested and settled? Are there things that you're holding open to see how they turn out? Where do you stand on how you see things now and unfolding in the future?
I'm very clear. I have 3 separate business plans that for the tenets of what I'm bringing to the world around guiding people with this money stuff and around transforming the ideas that people hold around spirituality and sales, like that whole thing, which by the way, I've changed the name because I'm working out the name right now. But I started by calling it rock bottom because I saw this beautiful picture of 2 men speaking, and one man turned to the other man and said, "What's your birthstone?" And the other man said, "Oh, my birthstone is rock bottom." And I thought that is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. If everyone approached every day with that sentiment, imagine the kind of money they would earn. Imagine the kind of impact they would make. Imagine the kind of love and community and creativity they could muster if they understood that level of humility is necessary on a daily basis. You need to be at 0. And so I named it that. But of course, I'm just attracting people who are broke and who are like, I just don't know what to do. And it's like, that's not where my genius is really served. Like of course, I was served when I had nothing. I found Neil Donald Walsh's book, the guy who wrote Conversations with God. I found it on the street for $1 when I was 18 years old. But the point is that I do believe that there's no place on earth, no amount of poverty that you could be in, where the message won't get to you if it is meant to get to you. So I'm not worried about people who are actually at rock bottom. I'm confident my work will reach them. It's just that in terms of me having the impact that I want to make, I have a vision and I have a way that I like shit to look. I was doing New York events. Everybody was dressed in clothes they bought at Barney's when that was still a thing. That's the kind of vibe I'm into. And I think there is a shame around that I'm overcoming too, where it's like, that's okay that I like wearing diamonds. That's okay that I like my events to be in 5-star hotels. That's okay, honey. That's okay. Like you can relax because God made you the way God made you for a reason. And that's something that I've been like really settling into as I move into this next trinity where I am bringing these 3 things into the world.
It's almost like you were given the taste buds in such a way where you were supposed to taste these things. If you were not designed to have preferences in particular ways, then they would simply be different, right? And then directed in the other ways. My husband and I often talk about our food palettes and just how subtle and delicious and the minutia of we have 12 different kinds of salt, by the way. So like, it goes on that level, but our tastes and preferences are not to be boxed in or ignored, or to your point around shame, they're really to be like honored, right? It's like a deep sort of honoring of the way in which we are and not the thing we're trying to be, but actually acknowledging the thing that is who we are on this planet. And so, okay, things are starting to unfold. You are also a mom. You are also you're a businesswoman. You're also a wife. Certainly your home today is different than the home you grew up in, right? Like life is different. How are you guys thinking and about communication at home around things like money and spirituality, right? Like there's a balance of things. So what does it look like at home around this blend of not only the things at which we've been raised in, which are always with us, but also now the fact that your life is so different? What's it like?
It's always about love with kids and being present and showing them. I believe we teach as we are, right? So our children are going to emulate us more than anything else. We think we can hand down lessons. We can't really. I think they're emulating us. They're learning by copying in a way. And so I copied my father and I followed him into the footsteps of poverty in that way. I also followed him into the footsteps of radical confidence, crazy philosophical understandings that most people do not ever harness in this life. I followed him. I just followed and followed. But then we have our own awakenings. And I have to trust that my children are going to have their own awakenings. And it's going to happen in a way that I can't even imagine. Like they've been imbued with a seed of oppositeness to whatever it is I'm bringing to certain aspects. They might be like a super yes to my Gwyneth Paltrow levels of like fancy ass shit. They might be a yes to that. Or they might reject it and they might say, I'm much more humble and I prefer the humble life. And they may move to the sticks and use their money in a different way. That's up to that. That's between them and their higher power once they get to a place where choices are being made. But I do trust that I'm giving them the truth and I'm working tirelessly to make sure that I'm not full of shit myself. That's the biggest thing that I can do. Because as soon as I'm lying, it's like I'm covering up what's true with lies too. And also just to say, because you said it looks like I make a decision and then just shit just happens. It's not so simple. And for anyone who's listening, who is actually looking to have these kinds of 10x financial windfalls, they come from internal awakenings. They come from me saying, hey, you know what? Maybe I really don't want to gossip anymore. Maybe I just don't. And then I give up gossiping. I don't talk about it. I don't philosophize about it. I literally just stop. And then a voice says, oh, maybe I shouldn't overeat so that I'm 10 pounds heavy and I feel insecure in my body. And I just stop. That's the kind of things that you think aren't related to your money, but they are. Or like I used to hold women in this box where like I would be like, I'm going to hang out with people who are less than me because that's where I feel safe. And so when I'm around women who are equal to me or higher, I'm going to pretend I'm perfect in those environments because I don't want them to know that I have flaws. So one of the great changes I made in this last year was I'm going to call up every impressive, like psychotically impressive friend that I have and just open up and share my dirtiest, like gross underwear with them. And lo and behold, as it turns out, these women love me more than they ever did when I was pretending to be perfect. And I feel loved by women. So these are the kinds of changes that need to happen if you're looking to have your bank account grow, because they're interconnected.
Beautifully said. As you sort of turn to these ideas around legacy and the future and the eventual transition from the planet and looking back on this like incredible life that you've been leaving breadcrumbs for everybody to follow, what does that look like to you? What does this big body of work feel like to you? And how would you sort of look back and reflect, let's say at a young age of 103?
You're saying when I'm 103, I'm going to look back and what is the breadcrumbs that I left for people?
Yeah, what's the legacy? Like what are the levels of satisfaction that you're hoping to see and in what ways on this world?
I think in the same way that all great people do, my duty and what I will have accomplished at 103 looking back is being able to really love myself and love what I call God publicly and without apology. That's what the great people do. And then we give people permission to do that themselves.
That's beautiful. I have two final questions. The first is around the fun things about money. It's like money brings us so many other things like stability, and we think about savings and the shame or the thing and whatever, but it's also really fun. And there are so many great ways that we can spend a little or a lot, but in ways that bring us massive amounts of joy. Yet recently, what have been your most favorite ways to spend your money?
Oh my God, that's such a hard question. I think that I'm going to answer it not with a specific answer in terms of like a thing, but I would say that they say that we have money blueprints. And for me, my money blueprint is pleasure and fun. And so like, that's all I care about, period. You said that stuff about security and safety. And I was like, that sounds like my husband and his blueprint. I don't even think about that stuff because I truly don't even believe in security. I don't see how I could be any more or less secure than I am right now. Like, it's just not the way my brain works. But I'm like, but I could love me a massage right now while I'm 100% secure, but I'm going to the spa, you know?
Oh, we're going to love it. And then my final question is, you are up to big shit. And you are prolific. Your message just resonates with hundreds of thousands of people. It's so incredible to see the world in which you've created so far. How can we, the women who are listening to the show, how can we light a torch for you? How can we evangelize you? How can we support you? What are you calling in right now, and what can we do?
Well, I'm definitely calling in changing the lives of brilliant, strong women. So if you feel like my message has a kernel of truth for you and you're listening, please come join my mission. Join and experience what it's like to be inside of this energy, because my energy is expansive. And in terms of just anything that helps get the word out about what it is that I've created, anything that helps that is really, really welcome.
Amazing. It's a blessing to have you here today, Biet. Thank you for being so generous with your time, your spirit, your vision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Getting Rich Together. My hope is that you leave every episode feeling more inspired, more powerful, and more connected. Until next time, remember, you have everything it takes to create wealth on your terms.